Hey everybody, great to be learning with you for this edition of Comcast as we continue our studies of Parshat Vayigash and take a closer look at the events of Perek Mem Daled, Pesukim Yudchet to Chav Gimel. Last we left off, Yehuda is making one final attempt to try to get Binyamin to be released from what looks like a terrible situation. Yosef has framed Binyamin and has threatened to throw him into prison, and Yehuda, who has pledged to look after Binyamin, steps forward and tries to get his brother's release. And he's having a conversation within a conversation here when he talks to Yosef. As he goes before Yosef, he's referring to statements that Yosef had made to the brothers during some of their previous conversations with one another. And here in Pasuk Chaf, he says the following: Vanomer el Adoni, we said to you, Yosef, to my master, Yesh lanu av zakein, we have an elderly father, v'yeled zikunim katan, and a brother that was born to that father when the father was very old. So these statements are true. They do have an elderly father, that would be Yaakov, the Av Zakein, and they do have a young brother who was born to Yaakov when Yaakov was old. That would be Binyamin, the Yeled Zikunim Katan. But the last person Yehuda mentions here, at least the events that happened to that brother, do not seem to be true at all. V'yachiv made, and that young brother, Binyamin, has a brother himself who has died, referring, of course, to Yosef. Now the big question over here is, how do the brothers know for certain that Yosef has actually died? In fact, as far as they know, Yosef is just a slave. That was the last they saw of him. They don't actually know that he was dead at this point. So how can they go ahead and claim that Yosef was dead when they don't know that to be true for sure? So Rashi offers one explanation of the words v'achiv made, in that the brothers weren't sure that he had died, but were saying he was dead anyways because they wanted to tell a white lie. They were very worried that if they said that Yosef was in fact alive, that this person who they were talking to, who in fact was Yosef, but they don't know that, would tell them to bring this missing brother, Yosef, down to Egypt as well, just like he had done for Binyamin. Again, as far as the brothers know, the Egyptian who they're talking to has no knowledge of their family whatsoever. Little do they know it's actually Yosef. And so just like this Egyptian royal had demanded that they bring Binyamin down to Egypt to prove that they weren't spies, had they said that Yosef was in fact alive, this Egyptian royal, again, who in fact was Yosef, would have demanded the same. And they didn't want to get into that situation, so they lied and said that Yosef was dead so that they would not have to bring proof of Yosef's existence. According to Ramban, though, the brothers actually believed that Yosef was dead. They thought there was no possible way that Yosef could have survived all those years being a teenager in a foreign country with no family to support him, living among the worst of the worst. So they assumed that he had died at this point, which actually explains a lot, says the Ramban, when you look at the events that happened just after this conversation, what's going to be happening in the next Perek. Yosef, of course, was sold from Canaan, right there on your screen, to Egypt. But he might have wondered, and the brothers might also have wondered, how come they never went to search for him during all these years that Yosef was lost? Once they saw how sad Yaakov was for losing Yosef, how come they never actually tried to retrieve him and find him from Egypt and to locate his whereabouts? Why didn't they conduct a search? And so one reason for that is that they believed he was actually dead. By the way, this is also a reason why Yosef never bothered to contact his father Yaakov during all those years that Yaakov and he were separated, because he assumed that Yaakov thought that he was dead. Why else wouldn't have Yaakov come to look for him during all those years? So this was some major misunderstandings here between both the brothers and Yosef and the family in general. Yosef believing that his family thought he was dead, the brothers believing that he was actually dead, when in fact he was alive and well all this time in Egypt. We'll have a chance to look at that a little more closely and explore some of the events of this Perek, as well as some future events in the next Perek when we get back together in class.